1:34, 26 minutes before 2 in the afternoon on this beautiful Sunday. I'm guessing it's a beautiful Sunday because we're doing a pre-record. But I'm just hopeful that it's going to be a beautiful Sunday in 3 days.
Just throwing it out there.
Just giving them what they can. I'm on the phone here chatting with Eugene Peterson. He's the author of a book called The Pastor, and it's a memoir. It's a memoir of his life, and in a lot of ways, it's a call, and it's I'm trying to provoke a kind of way of thinking about being a pastor in the world. And when we came into the segment, I mentioned that there was this introduction that says that you have this sense of being pastor maybe, that in a world where there's a loss of ecclesial consensus on how we ought to live, and none of us is sure what we ought to be doing much of the time, but there is a maybe. And then you also raise the idea of a witness, that you don't just tell people how they ought to live, but you try to describe what your lived experience is. And is that much the way you've thought about being a pastor, that you are on a journey along with a group of people who are trying to figure out what it means to be those who live in the way of God in the world that we find ourselves?
Oh, my, yes. That's very much so. But I was also in a culture where there was a great deal of uncertainty about how to be a pastor. It's not we've lost the traditions of being pastor. And all these different denominations and sects and things. And I realized I don't want to copy anybody else. I want to find out how who I am is being shaped into being a pastor. God's using this stuff of my life in order to make me a pastor. And I don't want to... that's why I love that phrase of Ann Tyler's novel about maybe.
Saint Maybe.
Saint Maybe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you're never really sure what you're doing, if you're doing it right or not. Well, it gets more sure as you go along. Mm-hmm. But I always disliked people who were telling me what pastors ought to do and how to do it, and just seemed to be so inauthentic.
And do you feel like you had some freedom because you were starting a new congregation? Was it Presbyterian?
It was Presbyterian.
And the Presbyterians aren't, their hallmark doesn't tend to be freedom and kind of do it your own way. But you had some freedom to create your role of being a pastor in a way that made sense for you.
It did, yeah. They gave me a lot of freedom.
Yeah. And that allowed you to have a congregation that functioned differently. I mean, in hearing the stories in the book, you were really creating something new, not only for you as a pastor, but for the people in your church and how they would relate to one another and to you and to the Bible and everything. You were really renegotiating a whole set of relationships.
Yeah, I was. Many of the people in my congregation were new Christians, just floating around, and somebody would bring them or invite them. But a lot of them had grown up in the church, and they expressed surprise that we could do this personally, relationally.
Yeah,
a family. I made a big deal out of the Eucharist and the family meal being part of the same spectrum. Mm-hmm. And to sit down at a meal with your family and realize this is the same thing that we're doing at the Eucharist on Sunday. Suddenly the whole thing started getting a sense of integration and wholeness and relational. Mm-hmm. So that was a big thing for me, to be local and to be personal.
And you tell in the story that the kids of the church called you Pastor Pete.
Yes.
Yeah. What I mean, that like the kids made up a little nickname for you based from your last name, that they didn't just call you Pastor Peterson or Pastor Eugene, but they had a little nickname for you.
Well, it was one of the young people, teenager, who called me Pastor Pete the first time, and the others heard her, and they all started doing it, and it just kind of took on. Yeah. Interestingly, those kids. They're now in their 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
And when they come by here to see me, they always still call me Pastor Pete.
Pastor Pete. Well, I think that's interesting because a lot of people's experience with the pastors and with church leaders and with hierarchies within religion is that the pastor will tell you what to call them. You don't often have the freedom to give the pastor the name. That the pastor, like for a lot of people, there's a whole christening service, right? And the pastor gives you your name. You don't give the pastor your name. So I think that is that's something interesting, that you were in a relationship with the people of your congregation where you were naming one another.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Well, now the book gets into, trying to help people think through some issues that maybe they haven't seen before, some issues of the pressures of what it means to be a pastor, being called to be the one who runs an organization, or the one who's trying to sell a product, or the one who's trying to represent a brand. And you do this gentle way through the book, through your own story, of pointing out and sometimes poking at those places to say, if you're going to try to be a pastor like that in the postmodern age that we live, things are going to get difficult for you. So you're writing a book that's not only about your own story, but you're really trying to provoke folks to think in a new way. Do I have that right? You do. What is it that drove you to want to have a memoir that would also be written in that tone? Well, I don't think that was so much deliberate. It's just who I was. It just came out. But the more I did this, I realized that the very heart of what I was doing was, number one, trying to give witness to what God is doing in the world, but to do it in such a way that it was relational to them. I wasn't giving them. I think the thing, so much in the evangelical church, we talk about the Bible is the Word of God, it's the true Word of God. I wasn't so much interested in that. I took that for granted. What I wanted to show was that everything in the Bible is livable, and this is not something just to believe in or think is true. You can actually get this into your life. And so I think that by doing that for years and years and years, I think it kind of got into my skin too. Yes, that you wanted to live that out as well. Yeah. Was this a project that you sat down and said, now I'm going to write my memoir, or had you written sections of this before and pulled it together? I'd written some of these stories before. Yeah. But I'd never saw them as part of a whole. And again, this memoir was not my idea. Oh, it wasn't? It was a publisher's idea. And I refused at first. I thought, I don't know, I don't think I could do that, or even want to do that. Yeah. I've always written from a text, and the text kind of gave me a safe boundary to work with. And to take myself as the text just seemed awkward. But after being convinced that I should at least try it, I think after about 6 months or 8 months, suddenly I realized this. That's when I started realizing every step is an arrival. I began to see my life as coherent, and really coherent around the vocation of pastor. So that's how it happened. It was kind of a process. And I've known that you have referred to yourself as a pastor in your life when other people will try to put you in other categories, that you, much like maybe that feeling you had on the airplane when you tried to use another category for yourself, said, no, really, I'm a pastor. Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about the cover of the book. I don't know if you had much to do with it, but it's interesting. It's a silhouette. And has your name, and mentions that you've written some other things, and has every step and arrival subtly there on the bottom. So it seems that maybe that was something you wanted to be there. But your silhouette is overlaid on the text from the Book of Revelation. Did you have something to do with how you wanted people to see the cover of the book, or was that just a designer's choice? That was a designer's choice, but I was really pleased with it because there are two things on the cover besides my outline of my portrait. Yeah. The top part is the Book of Revelation, which is really that was the place where it all came together for me. When I realized that John was a pastor, and I was a pastor in New York City, a kind of a Babylon place, and. It's interesting because for so many people, the Book of Revelation is the scary part of the Bible. Yeah. And you're not a scary person, but and you didn't see it as a scary thing. You saw it as a place of pastoring. That's right. Yeah, that's intriguing. Okay, so and then the bottom part.
The bottom part is a topographical map of where I live.
Mm-hmm.
This is from Montana. This is where I think the first chapter I call Holy Ground. This was the land where I developed a sense of place and locality, and it was as holy as Palestine, Israel is. So I thought that combination of those two things was just perfect. But it wasn't my idea. I applauded it, but.
Well, talk about what makes that perfect for you. Is it because you see yourself as a pastor in a place, and wherever you are is the place that's holy ground? Is that why that's meaningful to you? That image of you, Eugene, in a place being a pastor? Is that what you're seeing when you see the cover?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And John of Patmos. He, that whole book became autobiographical for me. It's a book of poetry. It's the first great poem of the Christian age, and it really just the book of Revelation really tells the whole story of Jesus and the church with these wild images.
Yeah,
but it's all he gets it all from the scriptures that had already been written, and I found myself just trying to do that, get the whole Bible together, and so wherever I was, I would be preaching Jesus and the church and salvation, victory over evil.
Mm-hmm. And you don't see that as a scary story at all. I mean, you see it as the way that you read John and the way of the book of Revelation and the way that you tell the story. It's one of inclusion and healing and of life winning out over death.
Well, I grew up in a culture where it was scary.
Yeah, yeah, right.
So I avoided it until I became those early years when I was in my mid-20s, when I was discerning that this is what I might be, and then I realized what John was doing, and I thought, oh, this is what I'm doing, or want to do. Yeah.
Trying to take that which people have seen as scary and make it something that's holy and beautiful and livable, and something that people can have in their life in a positive way.
Yeah.
Well, Eugene, Pastor Pete, thanks so much for being part of the radio show, and thanks for all of your contribution. And we wish you the best in all that you do. And I really hope that people pick up this book. And if you have any interest in the way that Eugene Peterson tells the story of God and the message, which I think is fantastic, I think that you'll find this book to be equally as encouraging in the life that he tells. So Eugene, thank you, and thanks for being on the show, and for all the good work that you've done, and for being faithful to be present in the arrival of every step that you take.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Eugene, thanks for being on the show.
Okay.
Hey, folks, we're going to be back here after the break, and we're going to be back with the Right On, because there's a number of people who are doing things in this world the way that they're meant to be. Not only those who are telling the stories, not only those who are writing about them, but those who are living it out. So we'll be back with the Right On here on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and DougPagittRadio.com.